and also from the north, from the coordinator in the north, Edel Byrne. You're both very welcome, and I think it's Susan going to begin the presentation.
That's right. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Susan Lohan. I'm co-founder of Adoption Rights Alliance. We formed in 2009 in response really to former Minister for Children's Barry Andrews' proposal to consolidate all of the existing legislation, and we were quite astonished to discover that that bill would not include a single new so much as a full stop on information and tracing for adopted people, almost 60 years after the introduction of adoption into Ireland. So the group was founded by myself and Claire McGettrick. Shortly afterwards, we were joined by Mary Steed, who is our US coordinator. Now, interestingly, Mary Steed is probably one of Ireland's first inter-country adoptees, because she was one of the 2,000 children trafficked from Ireland to the US for adoption. So we've got some valuable insights to the whole experience from her, and I think we can learn first from some of her observations. So I shall pass you over now to Edel.
Hello everybody, good morning, thank you. As Susan has laid, it is forgotten that Ireland started out as being a sending country for inter-country adoptees. We are gravely concerned that Irish inter-country adoption system has become a service for adults instead of a service for children. Adoption is not an adult right, it is about finding homes for children in extreme circumstances whose immediate families, close relatives or wider community or fellow citizens cannot care for them. The Hague Convention is seen as a measure of last resort for those children. Since Ireland's ratification of the Hague Convention, there has been much outcry about the drop in the numbers of adoption. We support the Adoption Authority's contention that this work should not be measured by the number of adoptions, but rather by the quality and propriety of those adoptions. In the opinion piece, I refer to Nigel Cantwell's opinion piece in the Examiner last September, shows we can't have it both ways in adoption policy. We have that document here for you. Ireland is not out of sync with other receiving countries. Some journalists and certain broadsheet publications have reported that the number of children adopted into Ireland from abroad was 11 in 2012, when the actual number was in fact 117. Laura Martinez-Mora, the Principal Legal Officer, reflects those numbers in her documentation. Falling numbers of children available for inter-country adoption is an international norm as sending countries develop their own domestic adoption practices. I would encourage everyone to review the Tristan Dow's case. Similar situation was cited in the Trinity College study of inter-country adoption outcomes in Ireland, and no action appears to have been taken as a result. Adoption Rights Alliance has reported this issue to Frances Fitzgerald when she was Minister for Children. The Adoption Authority and the HSE all to no avail, with the HSE claiming they cannot monitor the success or otherwise of any adoption, as it would be seen to be discriminatory. We have anecdotal evidence to show that there is some breakdown in inter-country adoption for some children in Ireland. Historically, Ireland's adoption system puts needs and wants of adults before those of children, resulting in a disturbing culture of entitlement, which is bolstered by a lack of courage on the part of many of our politicians and public figures who bow to calls for the reopening of corrupt countries from which we used to adopt. Ireland's treatment of children in inter-country adoption has all the makings of a Ryan report of the future. The mere fact of the registry of inter-country adoptions, in contrast to the register of domestic adoptions, is closed, will make it next to impossible for adoptees or birth families to reconnect in years to come. It seems clear we have learned nothing from our nation's past, and those with the power to influence and change ought to think about how they will be viewed in the court of history. Those individuals, institutions and organisations have a duty to pay attention to the needs of these children and listen to those of us who try to give them a voice, and they should have the courage to say no to the adults demanding the right to be parents. We should also listen to Interpol's Assistant Director on Human Trafficking, an Irish man by the name of Michael Moran, who has described illegal inter-country adoption as an example of human trafficking. No member of either house of the Oireachtas will be able to stand up in 10 years' time and claim they had no idea of what was going on. I'll hand you over to Susan. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Just to refer back briefly to Ireland's history of inter-country adoption as a sending country. So I think it's worth referring back to the practices that surrounded that from the 1940s to the 1970s. Huge evidence of corruption on the part of state actors and religious organisations in that movement of children to other countries, all of which is well exposed in Mike Malotte's book, Banished Babies. So I think it's disturbing that, on foot of having that knowledge ourselves, that we have proceeded to develop bilateral agreements in a lower standard than Hague with so many countries who actually would feature quite largely at the top of Transparency International's corruption index, countries with whom we would refuse or would be reluctant to carry out other trade arrangements with because we simply don't trust their paperwork. And I think it's disturbing that we have no idea with many of these sending countries how they are going to tackle the problems of adopted people coming back in the future to trace their relatives, as is absolutely inevitable. They will suffer many disadvantages because they won't even be able to translate their own birth records or their own original files. And I think there's very little oversight of that. We're also troubled by the fact that in 2013, former Minister for Children and Youth Affairs, Frances Fitzgerald, that she sought to unpick some of the protective measures which had been set out in the Hague Convention, or ratification of that in 2010. And that's been criticised internationally, no less than by Nigel Cantwell, whose piece Edel referred to recently. We're also disturbed by the connection of inter-country adoption arrangements and with trade missions which the Irish state undertakes. There's been a number of cases where talks on bilateral agreements have been attached to those trade missions, and it only feeds into the narrative that children are really a commodity in this. On the actual narrative, we're concerned about comments in the print media, TV media, that really adoptive parents who feel disappointed at the reducing numbers of children available for adoption, that theirs is a case warranting cross-party intervention at the very highest level. Nigel Cantwell and other experts in this area can readily attest to the fact that falling inter-country adoptions is actually a very positive development, because it attests to the fact that countries who previously were sending children have developed more mature systems of catering for vulnerable children, orphaned children in their own countries. So I would urge members of this committee and to go back to their parties and to really caution their party members on taking at face value some of the lobbying that they receive on this issue. And we would just say that if the previous Minister for Children can amend legislation to accommodate 23 couples who want to adopt from a Hague non-compliant country, then surely the current Minister for Children can do the same to introduce legislation for at this stage we reckon there's about 100,000 adopted people in Ireland. And yesterday we were pleased to have met with Minister Flanagan to discuss some of the terms of the Commission of Inquiry into practices surrounding adoption and mother and baby homes. And he has given us his undertaking that he is most concerned to have tracing and information legislation out as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And I want to now welcome from International Options